on Jerusalem Dateline. This week on Jerusalem Dateline, an Egyptian airplane falls from the sky over the Mediterranean. ISIS could be responsible for the catastrophe that's already rippling around the world. Plus, an in-depth look at Jordan's King Abdullah and why his kingdom is so important to Israeli security. Also, a look at the plight of the Yazidis and how ISIS still terrifies these gentle people. And a mural 6 years in the making brings the Bible to life in Jerusalem. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. We're coming to you this week from just outside the walls of the Old City. While the world is still reeling from the crash of Egypt Air 804 into the Mediterranean Sea on its way from Paris to Cairo. Here's the latest from our CBN News headquarters.
Passenger belongings and parts of the aircraft were found 180 miles from the Egyptian city of Alexandria. The search for the plane entered a second day after the jetliner vanished over the Mediterranean with 66 people aboard, 56 passengers and 10 crew members. Many officials suspect that terrorism is most likely to blame, including the possibility of an inside job at an airport.
The possibility of having a different action or having a terror attack is higher than the possibility of having a technical.
If it was terrorism, it would be the second deadly attack involving Egypt's aviation industry in 7 months. Last October, a Russian passenger plane that took off from an Egyptian Red Sea resort crashed in the Sinai, killing all 224 people aboard. Russia said it was brought down by a bomb, and a local branch of ISIS claimed responsibility. Thursday's disaster also raises questions about airport security. Western Europe has been on high alert after the deadly Islamic extremist attacks in Paris and at the Brussels airport and subway in the past several months. French officials say that airport security had been tightened considerably before the disaster because of the coming European Soccer Championship, which France is hosting. Meanwhile, grieving family members of the 66 people on board are seeking answers.
I am very tired.
Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Well, the threat from ISIS and other Islamic groups is the #1 concern for many nations in the Middle East. And Jordan, one of the most strategic countries in the region, could be the next target. Author and Middle East expert Joel Rosenberg says it's a critical time for the United States to support this faithful ally. In January 2015, ISIS shocked the world by burning a captured Jordanian pilot alive. The act also put the Islamic State and Jordan on a collision course. King Abdullah and his country are a critical ally against ISIS and a strategic asset to Israel. Here's why. Jordan sits on Israel's eastern border. As we look at the Jordan Valley, you can see that it forms a natural geographic and strategic barrier on Israel's eastern front. It's one reason why Jordan plays such a crucial role in today's Middle East.
Many Americans, many Westerners don't even think about Jordan as an important country, right? But Jordan is the eastern cornerstone of the security architecture that keeps Israel safe and is the buffer, the frontline buffer against the wave of Islamic jihad that is coming towards the West.
Best-selling author Joel Rosenberg wrote about Jordan in his latest series. He also enjoyed what a central character in his novels got to do, meet King Abdullah of Jordan.
What happened was the King Abdullah, the King of Jordan, read one of my novels. It happened to be The First Hostage. He read it in January. A friend of his had read it and gave it to him. And he enjoyed it and invited me and my wife to come and visit him.
Rosenberg also included the king in his latest 2 books. From their time together, Rosenberg discovered the enormous pressures facing King Abdullah and his kingdom. He wrote about those challenges recently in the Jerusalem Post.
The moment is incredibly dangerous, meaning he's got 30% of his population aren't Jordanian citizens. They're Syrians, they're Iraqi refugees, and nobody exactly knows who each person is. What percentage of them are loyal to ISIS? How many of them are members of ISIS sleeper cells? Nobody knows.
It's a concern shared by Israeli Deputy Chief of Staff, General Yair Golan.
Jordan is terrifying by the presence of the Islamic State in Jordan cities and towns.
While Golan is optimistic about Jordan's stability, he agrees with Rosenberg that ISIS could turn its sights there.
We know that ISIS is trying to bring down the government of Iraq. We know that ISIS is trying to bring down the government of Syria. The question is, where do they go next? Now, I'm not saying that definitively Jordan will be the next place that they try to overthrow, but it makes sense.
Jordan's King Abdullah appears qualified and ready for any threat from ISIS. Trained as a commando, he serves as General Commander of Jordanian Special Forces. The king made headlines around the world when he personally led a strike against the Islamic State after ISIS killed the Jordanian pilot.
The king understands instinctively how to fight terror and how to train his military to deal and his security forces to deal with this threat. But will that be enough? That's the question.
The Syrian refugee situation is also a burden. Since the Syrian civil war began, Jordan's population has exploded 30%.
30% more, that's 60 million people. Imagine the American people, American government having to take care of the food, clothing, shelter, education, health care for 60 million non-citizens. That's what Jordan is essentially facing.
Rosenberg believes the U.S. can do more to stand with his strategic Arab ally.
We learned that Jordan only has 8 working Black Hawk helicopters. And we were told that 12 are needed to effectively run the type of cross-border anti-terror, anti-ISIS raids into Syria, into Iraq that are needed. Now, the United States has promised to give 8 more Black Hawks at the end of 2017. I have to ask, why are we waiting? If Jordan's king is willing to be in the fight, is in the fight against ISIS, why don't we give him these helicopters now?
He also believes King Abdullah fits the kind of Muslim leader the West needs now.
He is a moderate. He believes in Jews, Christians, and Muslims working together. He's actively in a hot war, fighting against Islamic extremism and radicalism, apocalyptic Islam. Here's a guy who is our ally and wants to help and is helping. This is what we want, right? We hear people say, well, how come we don't hear Muslims standing up against these radicals, standing up against these jihadists? How come they're not doing anything? He is. King Abdullah is. We need to help him, lest, we wake up one day and find that we didn't do enough and he and his government are gone.
Up next, the never-ending nightmare of the Yazidi people, like these children who witness decapitations. Meet the nun who's helping these victims of ISIS to heal after this. The Yazidi people have suffered horribly at the hands of ISIS. Some have managed to escape to Europe, but the Europeans also invited in some of the Yazidis' torturers, disguised as refugees. And now their nightmare has returned. Dale Hurd has this story from Stuttgart, Germany. And we want to warn you, this story contains some disturbing content.
You've no doubt heard of the terrible suffering of the Yazidi people at the hands of ISIS. The rapes, the murders. The fortunate ones made it to Europe, where they thought they had escaped their Muslim torturers to find peace and safety. But after our interviews in Germany with several Yazidi victims, it became clear that for all of them, a normal life is probably never coming back. They're still tortured by what was done to them and what they saw. Ayas was just 15 when he was told to convert to Islam and join ISIS or die.
There were big ovens made of mud. The ovens were made for baking bread, but big enough to hold a person. ISIS forced me and the other young men to push and throw elderly people into the ovens, and they burned them. One of my friends was forced to put one of the old people in the oven and heard his voice and knew it was his own grandfather.
Aida was taken from her husband and made a sex slave, but she tried to protect the young pre-teenage girls who were also being raped.
We were like a flock of sheep without a shepherd. One day, the guard grabbed a 9-year-old girl and took her to the second floor into the bathroom. And he raped her while she was crying and screaming. And we could hear it all. But what could we do?
Hadia said she and the other women and girls tried to make themselves as unappealing as possible to stop the rapes.
We did not wash, and we pretended to be insane so that ISIS would not rape us, because otherwise they simply took us to do so as they liked.
This girl was just 12 when she was used as a sex slave. She told us how another young girl killed herself after being raped. The Yazidis here in Germany saw horrific things done to their family members and friends by Muslims in the Middle East. Now they're watching as Muslim refugees are coming to Germany, invited by the government, and some are afraid again. Because ISIS has come to Europe, German police know that the Islamic State planted jihadists among the refugees flowing into Germany, and that an attack could be imminent. Now these Yazidis must face it all again. Radical Salafist Muslims on the streets of Germany, marked by their distinctive beards.
When I see men with beards, I get very scared and start crying. I remember how they look and what they did to me.
When I see someone with a beard, even if he is not from ISIS, I get paralyzed. I cannot walk, not scream or anything. I cannot even look at him.
These Yazidis are cared for in Germany by Sister Hatuna, who has been rescuing victims of persecution for 26 years. They call her their mother.
Many of them, they cannot sleep because the night is too long for them. Everything come back. They're suffering. And even here in Europe or in Germany, if they see covered people, if they see some people with a beard, which one they shave the mustache, they mean they're ISIS, Salafist, and they are afraid more than that.
Aida's children saw people decapitated and are afraid of beards and knives. Several of our interviews ended in tears.
I feel with them, you know. They are all my sisters. What is happening with them is like happened with me too. I hear thousands of thousands like these stories. Not 1, 2, 3, 4. One girl, 14 years, in only the 2 first months, she was 280 times raped.
Sister Hatuna's personal experience as a victim of Muslim persecution has made her very politically incorrect on the Muslim issue.
Islam is a religion of persecution. Don't open the door for the killer. You know who are the killer. Why you let them in your country to kill tomorrow your children?
Hans Erling Jensen, International Director of the Hatuna Foundation, says the UN only cares for about 10% of the refugees in the Middle East, and Sister Hatuna can only help as she is funded.
All other, the 90%, that is 3 to 4 million or maybe more, and they are living outside and trying to take care of themselves.
They were forgotten by the world and left to the wolves in the Middle East. Now Angela Merkel has brought the wolves to Germany, and they feel forgotten again.
Psychologically, we will not recover for the rest of our lives. I can't get rid of the fear and pain from what I went through.
We sleep with our eyes closed, but our ears still hear the voices and the cry of our sisters and mothers who were raped. They cry for help, but we cannot do anything to save them, and no one helps them or us.
Dale Hurd, CBN News, reporting from Stuttgart, Germany.
Up next, the West is finally calling ISIS atrocities against Christians, Yazidis, and others genocide. We'll ask some religious freedom experts just what difference that will make in the war on Islamic terror. Coming to you from outside the walls of the old city, genocide. What is it, and what does the designation require of the United States? Gary Lane traveled to several Middle East countries for insights from religious leaders. They discussed the significance of calling ISIS terror genocide and what needs to be done to prevent more victims.
This is a genocide. We have to know the reality. And we have to see the reality.
When they said, oh, he's on fire, we must do something, they must not wait till his body is burned.
In my judgment, Daesh is responsible for genocide against groups in areas under its control, including Yazidis, Christians, and Shia Muslims,
resulting in the world's worst humanitarian crisis since World War II and the brutal annihilation of ancient Christian communities. More than 5 years into this war, 12 million Syrians, that's about half the population of the country, are either internally displaced or refugees in neighboring countries. As for the Christians, they say their numbers have dwindled from 2 million down to about 500,000. And it's not just in Syria. The Yazidis and Christians of neighboring Iraq have suffered from the worst acts of ISIS genocide.
Those people, they kill everything, not just they kill the human. They kill our history, our dignity, our churches. Now Mosul and Nineveh Plain villages, they're all the place, it's empty from the Christian.
Still now we have about 400,000 people are refugees. They living under tent in the winter, in the summer, in the bad weather, in the good weather, without income, water or food or shoes or clothes. No. Still we have 3,500 women are kidnapped under ISIS control. Still we have 1,000 boys between 6 to 10 years are captured in the special place in the Mosul and teaching them wash the brain of them and teaching them to use the weapon, a new generation for terrorists, for ISIS.
أبدا لن نحيد عن خطى الإيمان دربنا درب قويم دربنا درب قويم بالهدى القرآني أبدا لن نحيد أبدا لن نحيد أبدا لن نحيد عن خطى الإيمان دربنا درب قويم دربنا درب قويم بالهدى القرآني.
Some advocates suggest the creation of a Christian safe zone in northeastern Syria or a homeland in Iraq's Nineveh Plains. But some Middle East religious leaders oppose the idea.
We don't like to be separate, the Christian in one country, the Muslim in one country. Always we live together. We are brothers, sisters here. We have a good experience between Christian and Muslim. Why would you like to leave this experience? It's a good testimony for all the world. The Islam and Christianity can live together.
If the Christians are leaving, who will be salt and light?
Exactly. I don't think so. It's possible.
With the resolution from the European Parliament and the designation from U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, the world now knows that Christians here in Syria face genocide.
That is not a question of believe or not believe. I'm Christian or not Christian. This is really about the human dignity.
Up next, a mural 6 years in the making here in Jerusalem tells the biblical story of salvation from Genesis to Revelation when we come back. Behind me is the Scottish Church, and if you go inside, you'll see there's a plaque on the altar that says, "The heart of Robert the Bruce is buried there." From those who have watched the movie Braveheart, you'll know who Robert the Bruce is. Well, painting a mural from beginning to end for the Bible is a daunting task, but that's just what one artist did here in Jerusalem after 6 years of hard work.
For all who may enter these cemetery gates, we now declare this Jerusalem Wall of Life mural ministry open.
It took 6 years for Patricia Salveson to finish what she calls her life's work.
It's like I felt his heart. I felt the Lord's heart of joy because he knows this is his place and his message can come forth. In a place where the good news has been quenched, very seriously quenched, here are the walls shouting out his name.
It wasn't easy.
Such a vast job. It was just really overwhelming many, many times. But then someone would come in and They would be so touched.
Salveson completed the mural under the auspices of the Alliance Church in the Holy Land, who held a dedication service for her work.
Well, I think the mural is just a beautiful representation of our faith, of our hope, of the story.
The mural wraps around the walls of the Alliance Church Cemetery in Jerusalem's German colony. Some may think it strange for this art to surround a cemetery.
We're one of the few groups of people that actually don't find cemeteries disturbing, because our hope, our life, our story doesn't end with the grave. We're people who can walk without fear because we know that death's been conquered. We know that this is a stop in the story, but it's not the end of the story.
This cemetery, now an official Ministry of Tourism site, enjoys a rich heritage and history.
It's great to have this place dedicated, and especially putting this mural on the walls where they talk about the story of God through all the history, and especially the story of salvation for all humanity.
The mural itself is just gorgeous. Just the story depictions are really, really thought-provoking, especially the end with just the coming back of Jesus and the lion and the lamb. It's really awesome.
Salveson calls the artistic style impressionistic realism. Her favorite scene? The resurrection.
Because Miriam, she thought Jesus was the gardener. And she said, "Where did you put his body?" And then he spoke her name. And she had this love relationship with him. That's the kind of relationship I have with him. But I also love the scene with the lamb, because it's not a traditional Calvary scene. It's a scene with the Passover lamb, like John the Baptist said, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world."
She found inspiration from her own transformed life.
The inspiration is a four-letter word, L-O-V-E. The Lord who did for me what I could not do for myself. He took me out of this pit. He put a song in my mouth, a paintbrush in my hand, and he said, "You're going to live." Well, it's really a love story for all people from all over the world.
Well, when you come to Jerusalem, seeing that mural in the German colony is well worth it. That's it for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.